Your history lesson today is all about air travel. Can you make a timeline to show changes in air travel? The story begins in France in 1783 with hot air balloons.
Joseph Michel and Jacques-Étienne Montgolfier were the sons of a paper manufacturer from Annonay in the south of France. Educated in chemistry, physics and architecture, they eventually took over their father's firm. Appointed as suppliers to the court meant financial security, so the Montgolfiers were able to devote much of their time to research. They invented a calorimeter and a method of manufacturing transparent paper that earned them an outstanding reputation in the paper trade. But at a very early stage, Joseph began to take an interest in flight. He read of a gas discovered in 1766 by Henry Cavendish that was said to be 14 times lighter than air. Its name, hydrogen. This fired his imagination. Joseph filled small paper spheres with hydrogen and released them. They rose up but sank again after only a few meters, because within seconds the gas escaped through the paper envelope. So Joseph decided to abandon his experiments with hydrogen. Yet his interest was aroused once more while staying in Avignon. A shirt hung out to dry next to the fire, puffed up through the hot air from the flames. Joseph immediately wrote to his brother, Etienne, "Prepare a supply of wax paper and string and you will see the most amazing things." But Joseph didn't understand that it was heat that was making the air expand and rise. He thought the smoke was what he'd long been searching for. What's more, he reckoned the more pungent the smell, the greater the lift the smoke provided. So for his experiments he burnt a mixture of damp straw and chopped up wool. We can only imagine the stench. But the initial tests soon proved successful, and in the first few months of 1783 the Montgolfiers constantly improved their balloons. They tried out different types of envelope, increased the volume and watched their unmanned balloons soar higher and higher, up to 300 meters. Then, in Annonay, the Montgolfier brothers showed the assembled crowds how air, heated by fire, could lift a 33-meter-high balloon more than 1,000 meters into the air and carry it 2 kilometers. This achievement found swift recognition. News of it quickly reached the Académie des Sciences.
In 1896, Otto Lilienthal developed the glider. Next came the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur. In 1903 they designed and built the Wright Flyer. It was the age of engine-powered flight.
And they began seriously researching flying machines in 1899. They thought Otto Lilienthal had had the right idea with his gliders, but his crash proved to them that a better way of steering them was needed. They carefully watched birds in flight and noticed the way they tilted their wings to change direction in the air. Wilbur built a huge kite to test out the brothers' idea that warping or twisting its wings would allow them to steer, and it was successful. In 1900, Orville and Wilbur went to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, to begin experimenting with gliders. In 1903, they built an aircraft they called the Wright Flyer, complete with propellers and a gasoline engine. On December 17, 1903, Orville Wright piloted the Wright Flyer for the first historic flight. They had done it. Although the flight lasted only 12 seconds, traveling 120 feet or 37 meters, and lifted the plane only 10 feet or 3 meters off the ground, it was the first time in history that anyone had successfully piloted a heavier-than-air vehicle under its own power. The Wright brothers continued to improve their airplane, but despite their success, they had difficulty persuading people they had invented anything worthwhile. Most people just didn't believe it. In 1908, they began to make public demonstrations of their airplanes both in Washington, D.C. and in France, and the Wright brothers immediately became world famous. They began to build and sell airplanes, creating a business called the Wright Company. They sold airplanes to the U.S. Army, created a flying school, and even made the first air cargo delivery in history.
In 1939, the Heinkel 178 was the first aircraft to fly using turbojet power.
August 27, 1939, the Heinkel HE-178 became the world's first jet-propelled aircraft. Producing 1,100 pounds of thrust, the engine pushed the plane to speeds of 435 miles per hour. But it burned fuel at such a high rate, it could only remain airborne for 10 minutes.
Indeed, he had already initiated studies in 1939 for a twin-engine jet-powered fighter using two new and more powerful engines. The resultant HE-280 was, at the time of its first flight on April 2, 1941, undoubtedly the most advanced aircraft of its type in the world.
In 1995, the Boeing 777 was launched. This plane had the world's largest twin-engine jet.